Hey everybody, Tim Higgins here. So we're going to talk about a little something that's a little bit different in TDM. We're actually going to talk about the GT Datamaker, why you would use it, and some of its benefits. So most of TDM is really focused on the portal, but there's a lot of features you can still do inside the actual Datamaker itself. Okay, so we're going to do a couple examples, kind of do a walkthrough, and I do a lot of stuff that I do. A lot of it's just because that's what I'm used to. But if you watch some of my videos in the past, a lot of that really is based upon using the Datamaker. So this is the Datamaker here. Let me start from beginning. Well, first let's do our landscape, right? What are we doing? So if I go over here and look at my databases, now I use this JetBrains tool. Again, it's not free, I don't think. Maybe you can get it free, but I prefer it sometimes. It's the data grid. Not selling it, but I prefer it other than just using the SQL piece, because I can add other databases to it. Like here's an Oracle, so forth, so forth. But what we're looking at here, we've got a DB stage. Okay, so we're going to focus on this one, not this one. And as you can see, its data is empty, which is perfect. And what we'll do is we'll call our source this MedSite DB, and of course we have some data in it. There's more tables in it as well. So let's just go ahead and just prove that out and see we have data there. So now let's go back over here into TDM. Sorry. So now back over here in TDM, we have this thing called GT Datamaker. Now that was the original to begin with. Most of you have probably seen the portal or things around the portal, but today we're going to focus on the Datamaker. So I'm going to connect to my repository. I'm going to log in. And the next thing it's going to do is take me to my profiles. Now here's my profiles. Now a secret to the profiles is, if you notice, all these are DNS-less. So when you go to create a profile, and we just say other, next. If you do the DNS-less, it will show up in the portal, okay? That's the easiest way to do this if you want it to share with the portal as well. Now I've already set these up. Hold on, that didn't look right. So I don't know, empty it. Yep, that's what I thought, because you have to say database. And the next, oh, it's because I didn't give it a name. Blah, blah, blah. And now I can pick DNS-less, and now you go and do your ODBC driver, all right? So in this case, it would be something like SQL, and then you just fill out your information. Like I said, any other ones will not show up in the portal, but the DNS-less will. Now, in this case, we're going to do our source, which is our MedSite. Our target is going to be this stage. I'm going to go ahead and connect. Now give it a few. Okay, now this is, again, what I can talk about as the thick client. Anytime you hear me reference the thick client, it's the GT Datamaker. Now I'm going to go over here. I can open this up. This is my project windows. Now there's so many tools built into the thick client that haven't made it to the portal, and might not even make it to the portal because some of them are very data type driven. In other words, these menus would change if it's Oracle, they would change if it's SQL. Some of that stuff, I don't know how they would get it, like comparing tables, comparing DB data, right? So I'm not sure how they could actually put that into the Datamaker, but you know, we'll see if it ever makes it there. So what I'm going to do is I'll make a project. And the project, we'll just call it GT Datamaker example, demo. That sounds better. And of course, it has to have a description. Now, when I click on this, I have a lot more settings. Now, we're using Microsoft Server, but if I'm using something different, this is kind of important because this also lets the Datamaker kind of know what language you're using, okay? Or if I'm using SQL, or if I'm using Oracle, or something like that, okay? Now, if I publish to my default, we're always going to make the default publish to target in this case, but maybe I'm publishing to an API. Maybe if I just want to always do CSV files. And this can change when you do your publishing. We'll talk about that too. My type, are we doing SOAP? Are we doing DB? In this case, we're doing DB. If I want to reformat my timestamps, I can. And in this case, we also have our groupings, our data group, our data set, and our data pool. I don't want a data group. To me, they're just kind of, it's just an extra layer, right? So we'll go ahead and delete this. Cut. And I think in the past, you've heard me talk about this. These can be arbitrary. So if I wanted to say dev data, right? But you can only have one that has data, okay? Because it's really just a layering of how your data's setting. So let's go ahead and say that. Version, we'll just call it sprint 1. Maybe I need data for sprint 1. And we'll say, okay, let's go. Now, these are mainly settings. Oh, sorry. My data is going to live in. So see, when I deleted the other one, it says, hey, wait, you can't do that. So let's go ahead and say this one has data. Oh, well, let me do it now. So let's just start over. How's that? So let's try it again. That's what I get for clicking around. The truth was I should have changed it before I closed it. So grid tools. All right, let's just call it GT Datamaker. Grid Tools was the original company. Demo, and now let's go back to here. See, I should have changed it has data before I deleted the developing one. So let's go ahead and delete that. Or I guess I could add the developer back, but I don't really care. I just want 2 layers. Here's what I'm getting at. And I don't care about that whole sprint 1 thing. So we'll just say version 1 and go. And yes, we're good. And it's kind of good if you guys see me make mistakes because you'll probably run into the same things in yours. And this kind of helps you know how to fix that real quickly. Okay, so now we've got our folder, which is our sprint, and we've got our project. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to register your data, okay? So if I right click, there's a lot of options again, but the one I care about is this register. And I'm going to say next. And you can register from anywhere you want. Best practice is to register from your target because that's where my data is going to go into. But let's say if I want to register from source, I would just have to make sure my target's cleaned up. But if I'm creating files and stuff, then maybe I want to register somewhere else. Let's go ahead. And I actually did that too quick. If you look at the registration, you have, I'll show you in a few seconds, you have a lot of other options that you can go to or come from, like CSV files and things like that. So we'll go ahead and say next. I just picked all the tables. I'm going to say next. And truthfully, what it's doing is it's looking at the schema of that data, of those tables, not so much the data, because we're going to create the data. Okay. So we'll say yes. That just says you want to recalculate the order. There is no order at this point. So yes, it's fine. But I do want some kind of, so here's the screen. I kind of bounced for a second. But for an example, if I want to do a simple XML file, if I want to do a CSV file. So you have a lot of options here. If I want to do another table from a different database, just say next. Yeah, I'd have to go edit back, but unregistered tables. So, but anyway, from there, let's go ahead and close this and close that. We're going to refresh, and I'll do another video on how to do different data sources because it's a little bit more than just this. Now, from here, what I mean different data sources, what if I want to come from an Oracle versus, and I may already have a video out there for that, I don't know, an Oracle, an Excel, and a SQL, and I want to come all into one, right? So, but with saying that, we're here, and I can see I've got 3 registered objects. If I want to view those objects, I can right-click, and there's actually a actions for registered objects. I can click on this, and I can come over here and pick Open Tables in GT Diagrammer, and this will kind of create an ERD vision for me. I always get this here, don't worry about that, but you get this ERD looking model. Now see, I have no relationships. And this is kind of cool because if you do have relationships, it shows them. But I do see my primary keys. Adjuster does not have a primary key, which is fine. So let's go ahead and close that. No, I don't want to save it. What I want to do, though, is I want to have relationships. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Projects, and we're going to go to Table Relationships. Now, we're not going to be in these relationships. It doesn't create it in the database. This is only within my TDM model, okay? So from here, I can see my tables. Now, if I go back over here and look, let's get back up here to our database for a second. I have, I want my adjuster to connect to my claim, and I want my claimant to talk to my claim. Now, what I have here is name, and my claim has a claimant name, and it has an adjuster. Now, I know this because I kind of put this together, but I know my adjuster is linked on the name, not the ID. So everything's based on a name. So that's kind of important that it has to stay consistent. Okay. So let's go back over here, and I'm just going to, now there's a lot of tools that the Datamaker can help you. Okay. So for an example, if I wanted to search for these relationships, it can do that. Maybe on primary key. Now that wouldn't work in this case because my adjuster didn't have a primary key and they don't map on the primary key. Okay. Maybe I'm looking at foreign keys. Maybe I want something that starts with a, first part of the name. So maybe I have something called development or source, SRC, right? That's very common. So, but I'm going to say TDM, but Datamaker, I'm going to try to force myself to say Datamaker because that's what we're looking at, can actually do a lot of this for you. And I can look at registered tables. I can look at all their, like here, I can come over here and say, okay, so I want to do adjuster name and I want it to link on adjuster. Well, let's go over here and let's just build that. So if I right click on claim, because I want everything to have a relationship to it, and we're going to connect to adjuster. Now, I'll show you this in a few seconds. Let me delete this. Automatically sees the primary key, but in this case, I'm doing a string value. So it's very important that these names match. Now, it's based off the crow's feet, so I can change one to meaning, one to one, blah, blah, blah. In this case, it's really one to one, but I don't really care because I'm controlling that with the data. I can also just put in the SQL if I want, select all from, and I can start putting in my query that I want right here, okay? So that's pretty powerful. So we'll say okay. And just like that, I made a relationship. Keep in mind, this is not doing in your database. Now, there is a section to push this to your database. If it's still there, I don't recommend that because if you make a mistake, you can screw up your database. The next time I right-clicked on claim again, this time we're going to click on this one, and I'm going to do the same thing. It doesn't link here. We're going to link on the name. So in that case, it's very important for me, and I keep saying this as a reference because it is creating this relationship. And it's very important that I have that relationship correct. And when I generate data, synthetic data, I have to make sure that that is correct too. So I can see here, I have my claim and I've got these two tables related to it. All right, so great. So now we have a relationship. So let's go over here and refresh. Now the portal does this completely different. You can build it in the portal as well, but by nature, the portal wants to find that relationship for you. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. What we're going to do now is we're going to start. I'm going to say new data set. Now at this point, it might say data group, especially if you're coming from the portal. One thing important is this project can bounce back and forth between the portal and the Datamaker. So some things you may want to start in the portal and come to the Datamaker for more details. Okay, we'll talk about that when we talk about something like data generation. So this is called claims. So we'll just say claims. I like to name my parent one folder. Okay, so like whatever the verb is. So for an example, now when I'm creating a data pool, we'll say make data, or I could say make claims. Okay, that's fine. Because your data pool is where your data is going to live. But now that we have the data pool, we're going to right click and we're going to say edit data. Now, one thing important, this window right here, you don't get by default. If you don't have it turned on, go to settings and click this use data creation assistant. Make sure that's checked. Okay. That is that window. Again, settings, use data creation. Okay. So make sure that's checked to get this cool little handy dandy window that's going to help you. Okay. So now right here, I have options. What we're going to do is we're going to just create our data. Now here's my tables. These are unused tables. What I like to do, this is just best practice for me, may not work for everybody, is go ahead and start adding a row to each one of these. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. So in my claims ID, I want it to just be a primary key. So we're going to use the next feature. Now, this is not a video on data generation. So I will come back and probably do maybe a 101 for that. But I want to go ahead and save that one. See, now it brought it up here to used. So let's do the same thing to these others. If I know I want a relationship between the tables, I'm doing this for one specific reason. It's because whenever I select a column, then I can see the other tables that I want to link to, even if I change this afterwards. Okay, it just makes it easier. That's all. So we'll say save. You'll see that in a few seconds. And let's do the last one. Okay, I right-clicked. I probably shouldn't have, but give it a second. Okay. Now, this is in the cloud. This is in Amazon, AOS, but so it's not as fast as yours should be on a server or something like that. I have a very small PC server here. So now, mine takes a few seconds to render. That's why I was saying that. Now that I have that, I can go over here. I can click on this and get the data painter. Again, I'm not going to talk about the data painter. I'll do another video on that, but this is a very powerful tool. The reason I added a value into the other ones, because now it sees these other tables automatically. So if I want to link to one of these other ones, now it can see them, okay, because they're being used. But let's go ahead and get out of this because I did some cheats for the sake of time. Now I'll talk about some of these cheats as I do them. But let's see, let's start with claim. Is that what we're looking at? Yeah, claim. So I'm going to start with claim. And my first field is claimant name. Notice I have a link back to that database, or technically that table, that column. So we're going to stick that right there. Okay. And again, I get that. I'll just verify that. I get that because I came down here and I chose this, well, this one technically. Okay. So let's go ahead and take that back out. But like I said, I will do a video on how to do data generation because that probably would take an hour by itself. So let's do case type. Okay. Now I'll tell you the best practice. What we want to do in insurance type is I want to link it back to adjuster, my adjuster table. My state, I want to link it back to claimant. So kind of in a nutshell, the claims table is kind of like a reference link table, if you will. Because again, on the adjuster, now on the adjuster, let's see. Yeah, right here I did something kind of fun. If the first name from the seed list equals Tim, which I know it won't, put Tim Higgins or pull it from this column. So here's a pretty good advanced using an if statement. Okay, so we'll look at that. So what I'm saying is if a random seed list, now your seed list, again, you have a lot of good data for your seed lists, but we're not going to cover that here, but I will show you what it looks like. So if I click on the seed list right here, this name, give it a second. Now with this window, you can get pretty long with it. Just be careful what your output is because you don't want spaces or anything like that in your output because it comes back as a character. But here's your seed lists. So I'm picking seed list first name. I know there's not one in there called Tim because I already checked. And then what I'm doing is saying if it equals Tim, then go ahead and write Tim Higgins or pull it from my adjuster table, adjuster name. Okay, so that's that. Our doctor, we'll just grab our seed list last name, but we're putting a prefix of doctor in front of it. Okay, and then the date, this is just a variable called CDate. Okay, whoops, I stuck in the wrong one. It is the current published date. Okay, that's good. Make sure I didn't mess it up. And you have a lot of these variables you can use. They're right here. Okay, so we're actually using seed date. Now I've been doing this so long, a lot of these I have memorized, which is right here. All right, perfect. So that's our claims table. Oh, you know what? There was another advanced thing I want to do here. This is my case type. Okay, so I'm actually pulling from a database on this one. So if I pull up case type and we look at this one, I can say, give me a SQL list where I'm saying select distinct case type. This database is going to be blank, but we want to bring it from production. Our MedSite DB claims table, and we want to match on the column name. Okay. Now in this case, the column name is going to be case type. So if I just test this, I have a case type. It's just more benefits on what you can do with the data painter. It's a very powerful tool. Okay, there we go. So now let's see if we can fly through some of these others. So now let's go to adjuster. Let me close this one and we'll go to adjuster. And again, so my first column is this is going to be my unique ID. So my service ID to match that one. Now that's kind of important because here I'm matching on a column that's inside the same table. Okay. So here it's just another seed list with a space in between it. My insurance type is just going to be just a list. And again, if some of this is foreign to you, don't worry, I will do a 101 on data generation, and we'll talk about best practices and some of the cool stuff that you can do with this. You know what? I'm off key somewhere, so let's see. What did I miss? I think this is a little out of order. So adjuster name. Let me pop this up. Yep, so that name's good. And then type should be right here. This should be my type. Okay. There we go. title should be this one. And then quality record is going to be a list of 2, closed and open. Now again, best practice, just in case if I take time getting to creating that video, one of the best practices that you can look at is I always pull up the data, okay? And I do my best to mimic the data. So if I go back up here and look, and if we just pull, like this is a stage, so let's just get, we're looking at adjuster, right? So if I get this from here, but I don't want the stage, and we just run that one, what I do is I look at this, okay, that's a numeric field. Now that's an ID. These are just names, first name space last name, so we got that. Here, I have a list of these, and if you want to know, you can always say what, select distinct, and then we want it to distinct on insurance type. Okay, and that gives me a list here, right? So I can copy that list, or I can output the list, or you can actually put that into a SQL list itself. So we did do that one. So if we go back over here, and if I can close this now because we're finished with this one. And if I go back over here and get that claims one I was showing you, and we come down, if I grab the actual SQL call, if I can get to it, we put that in there. Oh, my developer database is empty, so let's fix that. Now this is going to create a list that I can pull from. Okay, blank, line of business, another. Now blank's important because some people may be testing for null values, right? So if the database is blank, I make sure I either put that in there or ask the customer or the SMEs, do you really care if it's blank or not? Okay, so we got one more here. Let's just knock this one out real quick. So again, my service ID is going to match my climate ID. Okay, my name is going to be first and last name made from a seed list. My social security number. So there's some built-in functions. One of them is a US number. We want to separate it by a dash because that's what it looks like in the database, and I just messed that up. I think that's how I messed up the other one. But let's go back to here. Sometimes the copy and paste really isn't your friend. See, it didn't work. So let's go back to here. Save. In that case, let's grab this again. Now, if you needed to build out the social security number, that's kind of what I did in this case. Random digits 3, and then a minus, random digits 2, then a minus, random digits 4. That will build out your social security number, or maybe you're in a different country and you're not using this format. But this is the easiest way. Now, date of birth is really cool because in this feature, the date of birth says, give me somebody they can't be younger than 18 and they can't be older than 65 based on my current published date. Yeah, see right here, current published date. So let's go ahead and close that. Now this number is just a random digit. It's no less than 5 digits. It's no more than 6 digits. Okay. And then my state is just open or closed. All right, perfect. Save. So now what I always do, now that we have our data generation, I always publish just a test. So let's publish it to a file. We're going to drop all this cool handy dandy cheats. I guess I had it open twice because I shouldn't have it open like that. Let's create a new folder. We'll call this Datamaker demo. Or technically, yeah. Data. I was getting grid tools and Datamaker mixed up in my head. But I'm going to publish all this to a file. Oh, I got to save the changes. So save all. So now what this is going to do, give it a second, it's going to take us to our publish window. The publish window, there's a lot of good information. One thing you got to be careful is your sequences if you're linking to each other table. Test it, see if it breaks. If it doesn't, then you need to go change your sequence. And a lot of it has to do with how your relationships are. So in other words, maybe I should have made adjuster primary linking to claims and climate linking to claims. That would have put claims in third position. But let's do, or something like that. So I'm going to do maybe 5 records just to see if it works. And I'm going to export it to CSV. And again, this is just for me to testing, but there's a lot of stuff here, and you're going to see when we go a little bit further. There's variables. I can change what I want my current date to be. So if I need to go back in time or in the future, I had a customer where I had to do that. But let's go ahead and just do this. Oh, that big message said, do you want to run it now, or do you want to, do this later? So we're just going to say, what is this called? Oh yeah, this make data demo. Okay. So we'll run it, see if we have any errors. If we do, it's within our relationships. So let's give it a second. Now, which is much better. There was a time when you had to go to the database and change this. So if this sequence is out of order and you can't make relationships, then, open up a ticket and Broadcom will tell you how to change this in the database. I'm not going to cover that because going directly to the database is kind of tricky. And when I say database, I'm at the Datamaker database, not your database. All right, so that worked. We're good. So let's go ahead and open our directory up. Go to claims. Now let's see if we kind of have some type of relation. Well, this is going to be kind of hard to see, but I do have data. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with this. It didn't error out. What I normally do is just kind of cheat, and we'll drop this down to my local machine where I have SQL. I mean, not SQL, Excel. And now I can see it better. So in my claims, I can see I should see adjuster name, and it matches. Perfect. That's what we needed. Now keep in mind, this is synthetic data that's very realistic to production data. And then if I open this one, I should have a relationship between it. Okay, so it's right here. Perfect. We have that. Now the cool thing is, like I said, we have our realistic data. Here's our social security numbers. Here's our date of birth, right? And you can change the format if you don't like this. Here's our numbers. So if I go over here and just look, let's just verify. And from here, let's just look at our select all from, let's just do climate because it has that social security number. Okay, if we go in here and look at it, just run it. So here we have our first, last name, we have social security number. Like I said, even the date of birth is formatted the way it is in the database, so that's perfect. And then this little digit here, that looks good. That looks testable, right? So the whole point of this is to make test data. And then we have our open and close. So perfect. We have generated synthetic data that looks like our production data. So now let's go back over here and let's close this cool thing. What I want to do now is push this into my target. Okay. Because how good is it if you don't go into your target? Now in the target, what we'll do is we'll do 25. Okay. So publish the target and let's just run it because we're good. And like I said, this, you can set this if you want to do it in enterprise mode where, you can schedule it, run it as a batch, whatever you want to do. So we'll give it a second. And this is going to take a little bit longer because it's making 25, but as if you notice, it's pretty fast. It's pretty simple data. Nothing magical going on here. But while this is running, I'll go ahead and recap. So we took our data, we created relationships within that data, and now we're actually publishing that data with data that we synthetically created with the data generation tool, which is a very powerful tool called the Data Painter. Now you're going to see the Data Painter again and again and again, but it's a very, very strong tool. Okay, here we go. It should pop up with a message saying, you're good. We're good. Now we can open the log, but I'm okay with that. I'm going to drop this. Oops, wrong tool. Let's just go ahead and close that. Let's just go ahead and close this one just for real estate purposes. I'm on my laptop, not a lot of real estate. So we'll kill that. There we go. And now if I go back over here, instead of doing, we're stage. I'm sorry. I was about to say we had to change our database. But now let's look in our stage because remember they were blank earlier. So let's just close all tabs so we can start fresh. And let's just run this. And there we go. So now we have our data, okay, and our data should be very realistic. Eric, or whatever, it's like Eric. Okay, so that's correct. And then our adjuster is Jonah, I guess. And then if we go over to adjuster, we're good there. We have our doctor, looks right. Open, close. So we have, and we even have some blanks in here because remember I said some of the fields are blank. So we want to make sure we respect that, right? Because they may be testing for that. And that's good to have. All right, so it's saying that we just made data.